Where is the Reaper? When shall he come to take my dying soul? Mind numbing, soul departing is this life. They stole my spirits away, drained every last drop. All that's left lies my life, stripped away of any will to live. Can the Reaper steal away my life too? Can he grant me but this one gift? Or is it only souls he takes? If so, he shall be left empty-handed. Day after day, I click and type and scroll and watch and read and listen and above all, consume. And I am consumed by my own consumption. Eaten alive, swallowed whole, I am. I scream and scream and scream, but no one can hear me scream in a stomach so large and empty. A stomach akin to outer space, void of life, air, and light. Even a million things in this stomach would amount to nothingness, for if there is no taste to our consumption, we eat nothing. If there is no passion to our work, no purpose, we do nothing. If there is no spirit in our life, we do not live. And so, my hero, oh my beloved Reaper, when you come, you will have come too late. For upon this earth in which I walk it as a dead man. My corpse clicks and types and scrolls and watches and reads and listens and consumes. God is dead, and we killed him, was a grave wisdom from long ago. But now our fate is worse, for man is dead, and we killed him. Why live? What grants this life meaning? What grants it justification for existing? Does it need justification at all? These are questions that not only philosophers have been asking for thousands of years, but the average ordinary human being. In fact, I would go so far as to say that man has questioned whether or not life is or is not worth living since we first came into consciousness. In Peter Zapf's The Last Messiah, he begins his essay with the following passage, quote, "One night in times long since vanished, man awoke and saw himself. He saw that he was naked under the cosmos, homeless in his own body. Everything opened up before his searching thoughts. Wonder upon wonder, terror upon terror, all blossomed in his mind. Then woman awoke too, and said that it was time to go out and kill something. And man took up his bow, fruit of the union between the soul and the hand, and went out under the stars. But when the animals came to their waterhole, where he out of habit waited for them, he no longer knew the spring of the tiger in his blood, but a great psalm to the brotherhood of suffering shared by all that lives. That day he came home with empty hands, and when they found him again by the rising of the new moon, he sat dead by the waterhole." End quote. Zapffe tells this story as a depiction of primordial man coming into consciousness. The hunter finds himself confronted with the fact that in order for him to live, he must force another to die. That life inherently contains suffering. To the logical human mind, there appears to be a contradiction here. Why must I live if others must die in order for that to be so? In fact, why must I live if I myself die anyways? Now, Dylan James, a recent guest on the podcast, sent me a text today. He said, in referral to a passage from Tillich's The Courage to Be, quote, "This passage reminds me of Camus' observation that those who say no to life die, and yet those who say yes to life die. Whether you embrace life and kill the deer to feed your family, or you don't embrace it and you kill yourself, regardless, you still die. Death is inevitable, and so is suffering. So again, why live? Why kill the deer? Why go to work tomorrow? Why continue on in situations that you feel a prisoner of? I'm reminded here of a time when a deer was trapped in our backyard. Too young to jump over the fence, it began running toward the fence and slamming into it instead. It's back and forth, back and forth. By the time we managed to open the gate, we had been too slow and the deer's jaw had broken off and was dangling below its face. When we feel we're trapped in a situation we can't get out of, we will do anything to escape so long as we're in a fearful frenzy of autopilot, right? The suicidal is no different. Tormented by some great suffering, the suicidal feel themselves in a situation where they cannot escape, a situation where suffering cannot be relinquished. They feel concerned by their situation in life, cornered, trapped by the fence of circumstance and unfriendly emotions. We hear about others ending their lives, right? And we wonder, how could they? Abandon sisters, brothers, their mother, their father, their coworkers, their family, and enemies alike. How could they leave it all behind? So selfish, we say as we consider the man who murdered himself. We blame ourselves, for all who knew him had blood on their hands, right? Didn't they? Why, we continue to ask. Yet there comes a day, a dark, lonely day, when all joy in the world is lost. The sun and stars are stripped from the sky, the power is cut, and all that remains is pitch black darkness. On days such as this, the mystery of the suicidal is revealed. Hopelessness, laziness, and complacency rob man of his meaning, and he becomes ashamed of himself. He is unwilling to move forward. He is unwilling to make things work. While running away is an option, he wouldn't be able to run faster than his guilt. And so, unable to escape outside, he seeks to escape within. In many ways, he opts to destroy the world itself by stepping outside of it. The black hole of consciousness, death, wipes us clean. Nietzsche wrote in his Beyond Good and Evil, quote, "If you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you," end quote. Now, I'll admit, many times in my life, even last week, I stared for a long time into this abyss, into this black hole, a swirling galaxy of anxieties, embarrassments, and failing aspirations surrounding it. I longed to enter its depths. I longed to relinquish myself of all light and of all darkness. I longed to step outside the world of sensation and perception, good and evil, black and white, the world of no worlds, the place of no places, the great emptiness, the great void, or at least anywhere but the world where I'm me, living this life with these problems, no matter how silly and ridiculous they are. Again, why live when you're just a deer trapped behind a fence? Why live when you feel stuck in a job you hate, or trapped in a dilemma where all choices lead to suffering, or that all your efforts to achieve your dreams, goals, and desires feel mediocre and unsuccessful? Why live when, in order to do so, you will need to suffer and be the cause of others' suffering, that you will have to kill that deer? I've quoted the following Camus quote an uncountable number of times on the show, but I'll say it again for good measure. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. End quote. That is, before you go asking whether aliens live on other planets or how the universe began, ask yourself first why you should live. Camus argued through Sisyphus that it was the struggle itself towards the heights that fills a man's heart. We must embrace our suffering, embrace the absurdity of our existence, and thereby embrace life itself. In Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, from the section The Drunken Song, he writes, quote, "Have you ever said yes to one joy? Oh, my friends, then you also said yes to all pain. All things enchained, entwined, and enamored, If you ever wanted 1 times 2 times, if you ever said, I like you, happiness, whoosh, moment, then you wanted everything back, end quote. He says this through the lens of the thought experiment of the eternal recurrent. That is, if you could live your life exactly the way it is over and over again, with not even the way you turned the sink on this morning changing, would you? Would you go back and relive all your sufferings? He argues through the quote above that if you have ever said that you wanted to experience some great joy a second time, then so too have you said yes to experiencing all your sufferings a second time. Because despite your suffering, one single joy makes it all worth it, right? This is a topic explored in the anime movie Suzume. The story follows a young woman who, after her mother dies when she was a child, goes off to find her. In the movie, she meets a man who shows her love, compassion, and how to be happy again. But her life leading up to that point was filled with depression, loneliness, and the loss of her mother weighing heavily on her shoulders. There's a point in the movie where she goes back in time to see her younger self, who is crying after losing her mother. She says to the girl, "You see, Suzume, no matter how sad you are now, you're going to grow up. So don't worry. The future's not that scary. You'll meet a lot of people you care for, and you'll meet lots of people who'll care for you too. The night might seem endless right now, but one day, morning will come. You'll grow up basking in the light, I'm sure of it. It's written in the stars." End quote. The girl then asks older Suzume, "Who are you?" To which she replies, "I'm your tomorrow." Now, this isn't to be mistaken with hope. Both Camus and Nietzsche would argue that hope is the enemy of freedom. Hope keeps you in prison waiting for some act of God to free you. This is just a reminder that suffering is as fleeting and natural as the rising and the setting of the sun, just as happiness is. I'm reminded of the mantra from Herman Hesse's Siddhartha, where the protagonist says, "I can think, I can wait, I can fast." If you feel trapped in the endless night, do you have the ability to wait until dawn? Do you have the ability to wait out the storm of your consciousness, the storm of your depression, the rainy days of hopelessness that follow you? Do you have the ability to wait until that's over? DreamWorks' Puss in Boots 2, The Last Wish, gives a hilarious and heartwarming tale of how being faced with death forces us to confront what gives our lives meaning. In the movie, the title character, a cat named Puss in Boots, dies for the 8th time and is on his final life. After living his life solely motivated by fame and praise, entirely unafraid of dying, he is finally confronted with death in the form of a black wolf. He attempts to fight off the wolf, but is immediately bested, leading to the first time in his life that he ever feared death. Before this, the protagonist thought he had all the time in the world, so he spent all of it seeking the thrill of heroism, seeking the thrill of being a legend. In so doing, he abandoned his pursuit for love and genuine relationships. The plot gives him a choice to make. Does he find the final wishing star and grant himself 8 more lives to continue being a legendary hero? Or does he embrace death, and in so doing embrace the people who he loves most, embrace his life? Ultimately, he chooses that, quote, one life is enough, and decides to stop running from death and instead fights it. Now, there's lots of similarities here between Puss in Boots and Albert Camus' Conqueror, Albert Camus' lover, in the myth of Sisyphus. I highly recommend reading the myth of Sisyphus, and if you haven't yet, go check out my series on the myth of Sisyphus. There is a reason why desire, similar to wisdom and enlightenment, is symbolized with fire. After all, isn't fire a sort of falsified kind of light compared to the perfect rays of the sun? Fire will consume everything it touches. One is willing to burn their house, throw their family and friends to the stake, and set ablaze every last thing which prevents them from realizing their desires. Thus is the nature of selling one's soul to the devil, right? The price is your soul. The price is everything. Indeed, the successful man is willing to sacrifice everything: health, family, love, time, money, etc., to get what they want. The hero, to the contrary, sacrifices himself for everyone else. Because the successful man desires success only as a means to escape death, or whatever prison they believe themselves to be locked up in. By embracing death, the hero dissolves the illusion that life is a prison and willingly walks the line between life and death in order to preserve those things in life that gives him meaning. That is, he values his will to live over life itself. Now, I recently watched the film Nosferatu. The film follows a woman who, in her quiet moments of desperation and depression, accidentally awakens a vampire, namely Nosferatu. So the vampire, raptured by the woman's beauty, travels to her and wreaks havoc, an apocalyptic kind of havoc, upon the town she lives in, threatening to kill everyone unless she becomes his. In the end, she sacrifices herself in order to kill him, thus saving the town from any more harm. This story is many things. It is the story of a tyrant king who kills and pillages in search of what he desires. It is the story of a woman, the embodiment of Mother Earth and life itself, summoning primordial threats that men are clueless to stop. In that way, it is a tale about what happens when we don't take care of our planet, our women, and our children. It is the story of the collapse of a society. But for the purposes of this episode, Nosferatu is the story of a man so bloodthirsty for what he desires that he walks the earth as a dead man, willing to kill, threaten, manipulate, and torture in pursuit for that which he desires. And because of this ruthless pursuit, he is killed by the very thing that he was after all along. Nosferatu is a testament to how love and self-sacrifice will always triumph over fear and desire. It is a testament that in spite of the horrors of this world, we choose life. We choose to live, even if that means dying to protect it. In that way, asking the question, why live, can be answered by finding something that you're willing to die for. If there is nothing you are willing to die for, if death is something you are constantly running away from, then life will always be a prison. It will always be a trap that you find yourself stuck within because there is no escape from death. But if we can look death in the eyes and join the endless fight, knowing what we are fighting for, then the prison walls dissolve and we enter the battlefield, where we know for certain we will eventually be defeated, but fight anyways. That is, despite the fact that death is inevitable, we not only embrace its inevitability, but we taunt it with our swords in order to prove that we love life enough to fight for it, that we do not fear death, but welcome it as that which gives us the will to fight in the first place. So again, why live? Well, because you're going to die. What better reason is there to live? I'll leave you with a poem of mine. There comes a moment that, even if the sun shines and the blue sky overtakes the heavens, all light in the world hides itself from you. A darkness beyond the reaches of the brightest star fills your soul with an emptiness greater than that of outer space. A vacuum of despair you become. But verily, I say unto you, cherish your darkest hour. Only the stillest night gives birth to the brightest stars. As such, your dark night of the soul is but dusk longing for dawn. I ask you this: when has dawn not followed dusk?